Welcome and thank you so much for joining us on today's Meetup Live event on spring cleaning for a year-round happiness. I'm Janine and I'm the events programming manager here at Meetup. I'm sure some of you are familiar with me because I've hosted quite a few of these. And today I'm so excited, in case you can't tell, I'm joined by special guest Elisabeth Sharp McKetta. She is the author of Edit Your Life. I just received my book yesterday and I can't wait to read it. You will hear some practical tips to clear your mind and focus on acting intentionally. And you will understand what it means to edit your life so you can prioritize what matters and live with joy, right? Before we start, welcome, Elisabeth. Before we start, I'm going to go over some guidelines and the agenda, and then I will introduce Elisabeth. So for some guidelines today, some of you might have noticed the chat has been disabled. The chat will not be on for the rest of the event. And this event is also being recorded. However, you can only see myself and Elisabeth video. Don't worry, as I said, you can only see us, so you will not appear. However, since this is being recorded, you can watch a replay of this event on our YouTube channel, or you can watch a recap and a replay of this event on our blog, Community Matters /blog. Community Matters /blog, yeah. And everyone is muted except for Elisabeth and myself, so you will only be hearing us as well. As I mentioned, the chat has been disabled, so if you have a question, and we encourage you to ask questions so that we can ask them at the end, please submit them in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Also, thanks to Zoom, closed captioning is available. Feel free to turn it on. All you have to do is click on the live transcription icon at the bottom of your screen and select your preference. So we are almost at 5 minutes, and I will, after this, introduce Elisabeth, and then we will go on and get into the fireside chat. We have some really great questions and some really great content, and then we will do 15 minutes of Q&A. As I mentioned, we encourage you all to share your questions in the Q&A feature. And we will do our best to get through as many questions as possible. All right, without further ado, Elisabeth Sharp McKetta is an award-winning writer and writing teacher and a mother of two. With a PhD on the intersections between fairy tales and autobiography. I'm like, I can so see that because you're just like so airy and so sweet and have like such great energy. As well as a 7-year streak of writing weekly poems for strangers. She teaches writing for the Oxford Department for Continuing Education and for Harvard Extension School, where she won their highest teaching award. Congrats. She has authored 12 books, most recently The Personal Growth Guide, Edit Your Life, based on the experience of living 3 years in a 275 square foot backyard guest house with her family of 4, or 5, if you want to count the Labrador, which I will say 5 because you have to count the Labrador. Otis will be very upset if I didn't include him. My dog. She co-edited the anthology What Doesn't Kill Her? Women's Stories of Resilience, which Gloria Steinem describes as stories that will help each of us trust and tell our own. Elisabeth, welcome. This is such a great bio. And I think I said this to you when we were going over it before. Gloria Steinem, oh my God.
I know. We were, if you want to see like 2 40-year-olds dancing around the room, that's what happened when we found out about that blurb. We were so excited. Thank you so much, Janine, for having me here. It's such a treat to talk with you. And thank you everybody for coming. This is one of my favorite topics, and it's fun at the juncture of spring to sort of think about on a bigger level what we want to bring in and expand and what we want to kind of sweep away and minimize. So I'm very excited to be here.
And this is the best time of year, right? With that beautiful weather that we're experiencing. All right, so I'm gonna get started and go straight to our first question, which is, what inspired you to write Edit Your Life?
Yes, Edit Your Life. I think the sort of shortest answer is that I wanted to figure out how to edit my own life. I had been an editor by trade for several decades. I have edited literary magazines and taught writing since I was in my very early 20s. So I think in terms of editing. And when I say think in terms of editing, what I mean is I've trained myself to look at any piece of writing and ask, what is it in its ideal version trying to be? And kind of X-ray to figure out what its moonshot is. And then from there, sort of measure the gap between its ideal version and its current version, and figure out how to close that gap a little bit, how to sort of shorten that gap so that it becomes what it needs to be. And so when my family was stuck in a living situation that was unsustainable, we were in a big house that we loved, but that was more space than we needed. And that was, we had 2 small children, 2 very messy dogs, and we were pretty overwhelmed by house. We were feeling heavy with house at every level, energy, time, money. And so I had tried all of the sensible things I knew how to try. And I finally thought, I can probably edit myself out of this if I put my mind to it. So I wrote the book about that process of applying the way that you would edit any piece of writing to a life. And then in shaping the book to publish it, I distilled it based on many conversations I'd had with other people who felt that life was too big, too heavy. The things that mattered were getting washed out by the things that didn't. It seemed that through talking about these principles with people that I cared about and trusted, that often when they would try them out, they found that they were able to make positive and lasting edits. And so I thought, let's turn this into a book that will, make this sort of a course that can be elastic and accessible, so that more people can feel less overwhelmed.
Thank you. Yeah, as I mentioned, I can't wait to start reading your book. So I have one question. What was it like? Was there like an incident? What was it that happened? Like, did you have like an aha moment that you were like, okay, this is it?
Totally. I had a series, I guess like anything, there's sort of little shocks moving up to it. But I had definitely one aha moment that was preceded with a lot of little bumps. And the main one that happened again and again, which ties into something that I talk about in the book, which is to close read emotions, to look at our emotions for what they might be signs or signals of. What I found is that I usually have a lot of energy. And I found that when I would be out in the world with my children, or out in the world teaching my classes, or out in the world writing my books, seeing my friends, riding my bike, when I was out in the world, I had tremendous energy. And then the moment I would step over the threshold to this wonderful house that I loved very much and was very safe in, all of a sudden my energy would drain. And it was because I think the house, there was too much to do. I would go in there and I would see something that had been broken or swallowed by the dog that would, be expensive and difficult and scary to fix. I would see, the mess that somebody had left for me that I couldn't sort of get on the floor and enjoy my children until we cleaned up this thing, so that nobody, mostly so the dog didn't swallow it. I just felt that the house had become this sort of list of time-consuming and very costly tasks that was sort of consuming to my husband and me. And the week, I remember, before our aha, we had had a toilet clogged with a diaper, and we had on this particular day when I had the aha, the dog had swallowed an entire dollhouse family. We had a Labrador puppy, and then the other dog had gotten sick with something else and sort of barfed it all over the stairs. So we had this sort of house of dog barf. I'm sorry, that's really gross for a podcast.
I mean,
but we just had this house that was just like, we couldn't, everything was uncontrollable. Like if we had the dog out, it was eating the children's toys. If we had the children out there leaving their toys for the dog to eat, like the children and the dogs were feeling mutually exclusive. Like all of a sudden, everything just felt so hard to manage. And this had been going on, but on this particular day, it just bested my husband and me. And we sort of, got the house to bed and cleaned up the best we could and sort of lay in bed. And what we were both, I think, sorting out were kind of our separate, like, what can we shed here? What do we need to do in order to, have a simpler life where we can enjoy time with each other and enjoy time with our, sweet, lovely, growing fast children, where we can just do our work and not feel stressed about however hard we work, it's not going to be enough because we're, always running behind in everything, it felt. And then suddenly I had an aha, which is that this little tiny guest house that we had built initially to be a combination of an office where I could lead my writing workshops and a place where grandparents could come and stay when we moved to Boise, could potentially be our home. And, the more I thought about it, the more it seemed sort of just insane enough to work, because, well, when we travel, we could easily, we're carry-on travelers, we can easily get down to this to travel, and we have a wonderful time traveling. And then I thought about when we're young, when we're in college, we're expected to live in tiny spaces and let our lives play out in big expansive ways in tiny spaces. And then often when we retire, we move back into tiny spaces. So there's this sort of imperative of the middle of life to expand into, dining rooms and furniture and playrooms. And it just seemed all of a sudden like, is this working for us or working against us? So I put forth to my husband that we should move into the shed. And I think he was also just desperate enough that he said, yes. And by midnight, we had ironed out the whole plan. We had figured out every single part of it. And we're really excited about editing at home in order to live at home in our community like travelers, so that we could sort of live more lightly, spend more time on what we kept referring to as the good parts version of our lives, which for me is my work. I love my teaching and writing and my people, and sort of learning and travel. So that was sort of the night when everything changed.
Got it. Thank you for that. I'm going to hold my thoughts on that because we're going to come back to this, but I just wanted to say, like, you have that self-awareness, and that's definitely something that I want to touch on later on in the conversation, just having that self-awareness to know, right? Like, how do you get there to know when it's time to make that edit? And you're going to help us figure that out. So for my second question, as you mentioned in your book, life is noisier, messier, and more complicated than ever. What aspects of today's society make it feel this way?
This is a great question. And this is a question that I think about a lot. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this as well. Whenever I sort of circle this question, I come back to the research of two different happiness researchers, essentially. One is the psychologist Barry Schwartz, who wrote The Paradox of Choice, and the other is Daniel Gilbert, who did that wonderful TED Talk on happiness. And both of them give, I think, pretty good answers to this question, which is that we are the more choices we have, the more choices on a daily basis that we feel we have to make, the less satisfied or confident we will be with our choice. So the more choices, the less happy. Which, when you think about it, goes against everything that we really build our lives upon in the West. We prize freedom, we prize autonomy, we make, laws and plans, and we educate ourselves to have choices. Like the idea of a closed door, I think, makes a lot of people really anxious. It certainly makes me really anxious. And yet research shows again and again that when we have to choose between, 18 jams versus 3 jams, we're more likely to buy one of 3. Or if we walk into a store and have too many options of blue jeans or too many potential ways to, health insurances, whatever it happens to be, there's so many choices. And so I think, so when they break that down, some of the things they look at are the fact that just a few generations ago, I think about my great-grandfather and my grandfather, who were Ukrainian coal miners who came to America and basically never expected to go home again. This was the one job that they could do, and these were the people that they would see in the community. This was their option. They would eat what they grew in the garden. It was very simple. And humans have evolved to have few choices. We're super lucky to have a ton of choices, so let's not undermine that. But when you think about just in a few generations, what has happened in terms of human migration? I just think about how far we travel in a day, in a week, how far we live apart from our support structures, how we have choices, again, wonderful choices, to sort of create our own support systems and build our own family units. We have, more choices with, we have industrial advancements, we have more products, more things that we can, more things we can buy, more things we can spend our money on, more ways to make money. And I think maybe most importantly, we have so much media. We can't walk in the day without having words come at us, right? And each word
I was wondering, when you were going to touch on like the role that social media plays on this, plays in this aspect, because obviously, not only do we have many choices, but social media is also showing us so much. And you and I talked about this, where for me, I'm not very active on social media. I don't feel comfortable sharing my life in that way. But and we talked about this, where like I've edited social media out of my life because I would use it as one of like my coping mechanisms when I would be triggered. And for me, one of my big triggers, the way that I would react to my triggers was comparison. And social media is like, if you want to compare and feel really crappy about yourself, whether it's true or isn't true, like just go on social media and look at like, you know, all these fairy tales, right? And you will definitely, you know, leave whatever you're looking at not feeling really great. Like it'll be a self-fulfilled prophecy. So like what role, and that, like I said, like that's the role that it plays for me. Like what role does social media play in all of this, right?
I love that you brought that up. And I love that you mentioned the word fairy tale. One of my brilliant students a few years ago wrote a paper on actually in my fairy tale class about fairy tales and social media and about the sort of fairy tale way that we present our lives. And he was spot on with it. I think that's it. And I think the main thing I would say for people who love social media, and I'm related to some of them, and also people who don't, is I think that it comes back to that feeling again, you know, like the way that, you know, however we feel as we move through our lives, if we pay attention to it, we can get some good information. Like it doesn't speak well for me that I was, you know, tired walking over the threshold to my house, yet that's how I felt. And so what can I learn from that? And so if you are, you know, I think for us in our relationship with social media, I like you, Jimmy, don't feel good on it. Like I feel nervous. I feel like it takes me so long to make a post that then I spend the next 6 hours wondering if I shouldn't have made that post. Like I'm not very good at it. And I don't know how to I'm not comfortable being authentic on it. I don't have, right. I don't know how to do it. And so it doesn't make me feel very good. But I think if you do it and it makes you feel good and connected, then do it, you know, then that's your answer. But I think that it shouldn't feel compulsory to people that don't. I had a really interesting revelation about social media quite recently, because I was reading an article that looked at how people are excluded from villages, like across, I mean, over the years, over the world. And basically the two ways that people get excluded are through violence and slander. You know, which is pretty obvious. Like that's, you know, if you murder someone, they're out of the village. You know, if you gossip about someone enough, the village will tighten away from it. And when I heard that, I thought that's so interesting in terms of why social media has such a powerful hold on our sense of inclusion, exclusion, FOMO, that I think that we are very aware that on social media, people can get, you know, excluded, both in little ways, like, oh, you didn't get invited to the event, but in bigger ways of being canceled and being, you know, all sorts of things like that. So I think it taps into our kind of ancient, don't you think maybe like our ancient being like in a village and that being our lifeline? Like if you were exiled, that was kind of death. And so I think that the idea of like social death through social media exclusion is maybe a bigger deal than we think.
Could be. I mean, I also know that we did have a conversation, like, and I think like, depending on like, you know, your age range, right? Like it's different also for like much younger generation, because for them, social media, it's just, they're on their phones all the time. And we talked about this where it's like, you know, once you get off your phone, it's like if you're on vacation with your family and you're not on your phone, you actually have a chance to connect with your family and build those, you know, connections and bonds that you have. So, I mean, that's another form of editing your life, right? Okay. I'm talking too much. Okay, so let's go.
I love it. Keep talking. This is the fun part. This is what is so fun about it. I mean, and I think this relates to social media as well in this conversation, that I think we can all agree that engaging with something in a deep way feels good. You know, connecting to our work, connecting to our people, connecting to some activity. You know, connecting to a good meal, like it feels really good. And social media, if it, again, is a tool for connection, I think it feels good. But often I think for a lot of us, it does become a tool for distraction. And distraction, I mean, each distraction is a decision to make, right? Like each distraction is a this or that. Do I turn my attention this way or that way? So I think that by the definition of distraction, it is a perpetual, you know, decision to reconnect, re-engage. And it's so hard, the muscle tires. You know, I think social media is kind of its own paradox of choice, that that when it's, you know, that when I've noticed it like at the end of a dinner, if one person brings out the phone, the dinner's over, right? Like the conversation, then everyone brings out their phone. And then all of a sudden, like this that you and I are having right now, and that is such a pleasure, is gone.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going on to my next question. So, the next question is, how do you know when it's time to edit, for us to edit our lives, and how can we identify what isn't serving us that should be cut from our lives? And I think like I kind of touched on that earlier, right? Where it's like that self-awareness, like you clearly have that self-awareness. So like, how do we get there? Like, what can we do?
I love this question. I think about this question a lot. And I think that self-awareness doesn't always come in a linear way. There have been certain, I mean, for me often, so I guess the short answer is I think the time to edit is anytime we feel out of sorts with our life. And often for me, I will feel out of sorts for a long time before I actually realize what needs to be edited. So sometimes it is a matter of kind of tracking a feeling, and at first being annoyed at the feeling, at first trying to avoid or ignore or escape from the feeling, and then ultimately accepting that the feeling is trying to tell us something that we have a decision to make about. So I think of editing as a life practice, that at intervals, be it every year is a lovely place to start. Each spring, sort of take I think it's a wonderful idea to take, it's something I talk about in the book is the idea, the power of a retreat, not necessarily like, go to a spa for weeks, but, take an hour in your day, take a walk, for me, a cafe is a retreat, go to a place where no one has a claim on your time except for you, and kind of identify what a couple of base, maybe I'm jumping ahead here, but ask some hard questions about your life, and the simplest one always, if we're to ask a single question, I think it's what in our life gives us energy. What are we excited about? What makes us kind of rise up and smile and put a skip in our step? And what just makes us sort of heave a sigh and slouch? Just the physicality of how we respond to the different elements in our life is such a good signal. And of course, part of our work as editors is to crowd our life in with as many energy, it's like crowd in your veggies, crowd in your hydrate, crowd in the stuff that makes you alive, that brings out your kind of expansive energy, and then see if there's a way we can have less of the stuff that isn't working. And that's perfect correlation to editing a book. You want it to be a tight, interesting plot with fun characters versus like a whole lot of boring backstory that isn't relevant. So when to edit is, I think, when we feel something needs a change is a good time to stop and examine our lives with an eye for what might need to happen.
Thank you. Okay, so you just shared with us, just the very small step. I'm going to say it's the first step, right? Which is make that list, what gives you energy and what drains you, right? So now that we've done that, can you please share the 8 simple steps to cut through the overwhelm of modern life and live with more intention and joy? So we have the list. Now, what are the 8 steps that we can take and put into practice?
Yes, the 8 simple steps. And I'll start by, I feel 8 is not nearly as simple a number as 3. So why don't we start with 3? And I saw in the early chat, some of my students are in here. Hello, wonderful students. So they will be very familiar with what I'm about to say. But whenever we are talking about editing any written thing, we always come at it with 3 questions. And the first is, what is it? What is this thing? What is it? Without any judgment, just pure neutral observation of what is it? Where does it start? Where does it end? Where is it funny? Where is it serious? How long is it? Just basic questions. And of a life, we might ask, how much sleep are we getting? How much of our time is in solitude versus with people? How much of our work is deep work versus sort of more topical, shallow work? How much of our day is tending to our needs, how much to other people? Just things that we're not making judgments on. We're just sort of saying, what's the map of our day? And what is it? And we can do that by, tracking our time is a great way. We can do it by journaling is the way that I do. We can do it in all sorts of ways. But the main thing is to just get a picture. We could draw a picture, just what does the day look like of being Janine, of being Elisabeth, of being you, of being me. And maybe try another day. What is it? What is in our life? What fills our day? And the sort of, and then the next question from there is, what is it trying to be? And this is a harder question. I think it's a lot easier to figure out what it isn't doing than what it's trying to be. But often I think we have a sense in our life that there's something we're striving for more of. And in writing, we won't talk about writing now, we'll talk about life. In life, I think the best way to assess what is our life trying to be, or what is our sort of moonshot goal for our life, is to ask ourselves the question, if I had limitless blank, if I had limitless confidence, if I had limitless time, if I had limitless money, if I had limitless support, I would. And what is that thing? Is it start a business that helps, start a nonprofit that helps the environment? Is it, for me, it's always right. Spend more time with animals, travel. What is the thing that just kind of the verb that makes us feel alive, essentially. What would our life like to be more of? And is that, and so the next question is, so, what is it? What is it? Pure neutral facts. What does it maybe want to be? As a mother, what it wants to be is an engaged parent. Is it that every day? No, not as much as it should be. But that's its moonshot. So then, if I'm a writer, I should write every day. Do I? No. But here's what my life is. Here's what it's trying to be. And then the third question is to figure out what in it is working in the service of its what I call the moonshot version, and what in it isn't. So what is it? What is it trying to be? What works and what doesn't? And you'll notice that what doesn't work is the last question, because it's easy to tear in with complaints, negative bias of mine. It's easy to say like, well, nothing is working, that's why I'm here. But there is, your life is something, and your life has things in it that are absolutely beautiful and alive, and, elements of your making that you would be really sad to see go. So if we can start with what is beautiful, what is sacred, what is necessary, and then sort of pare away, that's the first step, is examining our life to figure out a right direction for editing.
I'm going to ask you about the other 5.
Yes. Okay. All right. The other 5. So the book is divided into 3 sections. The first 3 chapters are examine your life. The next 3 are edit your life. And then the last 3, which is really where this book departs completely from leaning on the principles of writing to being its own beast, is enjoy your life. Because unlike, writing, which at some point closes and is done, our lives are open books, and they will never be done until they're done. So in the edit your life section, once we've done this examination of what it is, what it needs, what's working, what isn't, there are 3 kind of avenues for editing, and they, I think, hold certainly most of the things that in most of my conversations, I think most of us are trying to edit toward one of these, and they are edit for clarity, just to have a clearer way of navigating our days, more self-trust, maybe more simplicity, edit for clarity. Then the second one is edit for growth. That most of us are, we want to grow. We want to grow. That's, in a way, what Meetup is about, is what do we want to grow into? Who do we want to grow with? Where do we want to evolve? We must evolve, or we perish. So edit for clarity, edit for growth. And then the third is my favorite. It's edit for generosity. And I think of that as about, what do we want to add to the world beyond us, that we leave, that is bigger than our own enjoyment, our own sort of small life. What the question it asks is, how is about adding to the green? How do we add to the world that will outlive and outlast us, even in some small way, through our work, through our love, through our play? And then the enjoy is one chapter on looking at enjoying the ordinary days, and not editing endlessly, and then tilting back from the exceptions. So those are the 8 steps that are to be followed roughly in order, but of course some of them will be harder than others.
So, okay, this isn't on the list of questions, but so now I have to ask the 3 questions that you said, right? Generosity, growth, and what was the first one?
Clarity.
Okay, so now, do you have to do all 3, and do you have to do them at the same time? Can you finish one, then move on to the next one?
Yes, you can do whatever you want. This is your life.
We want it to be most effective, right? So
yes.
If you feel that doing it in a certain order, or
yes.
doing one before the other, or doing them simultaneously will have the most effective,
yes.
Or impact on your life, then.
No, I love that question. And I'm glad you went off script, because this is a question that feels like a really important one to answer. And I've not answered it. The examine has to happen first. I think most of us, when we want to make a change, go crazy, like buying a thing, like vitamin C serum on my face will change my life. Will it?
Well, we want it to happen quickly.
Want it to happen quickly, which goes to the patient's question, which we'll come to. So I think the first thing has to be to slow down, step back, and examine our lives in some form. And I think that for many people, that section will take the longest. That it'll take, and same within writing. The best, the most effective writing process is often think slow, write fast. revise slow, if we think slow, if we really give ourselves time to pay attention to our lives and to not snap judgments about it and to not feel impatient with it. And this is so hard. I do not say by any means this is easy or that I succeed in this regularly or often, but this is what I strive to do, because it is important to sort of examine our lives so that when we're ready to make a change, we've thought through what is the right direction, what it needs to be. So it may be that for many people, the first section is the necessary section. Read part 1, read the first 3 chapters, and then sit on that for 6 months before then coming back to the middle part and thinking, okay, what I've examined, I've let these truths settle in, I've thought about it, I've talked about it, I've journaled about it, I've figured out what in my life, what my life is, what it wants to be, what it is already doing that I need it to do, and where there's a fracture that feels unaligned. Okay, what I need is, and then you'd probably pick, you could either read the whole middle section, or it may be that one of those chapters just sings to you and feels like this catches where I need to expand. So then I would probably go there. And like whenever I read a book like this, I read it and then I read it again, and then I take some time and I read it again. So it may be in that case that there's one that, because it is kind of a program in a way that
Right.
there are prompts at the end of each chapter. I forgot to mention that. So it may be that, kind of like artist way, that we'll sit with it for a while and play with it for a while. And then once we've sort of picked our editing strategy, then we would go to the end about how to implement this, and then how to come back when we fall off of this, as of course we all will.
So we talked about being overwhelmed, from life, but I feel like we talked also like a lot of this work that has to be done to edit your life is reflecting, right? Which can be a tall glass of water, right? And could be overwhelming, right? Like this is a big task. So my monstrosity. How can we be patient with ourselves as we determine what that looks like, right?
Yes, this is such a hard question, and a question that the book seeks to answer. And in one, one of the principles that comes up a lot that is introduced in the first section is one about first choices, about identifying first choices in 4 areas of our life that we all have. And again, and the book is meant to be elastic, that whichever life you are living, whatever it does or does not contain, however you feel about that, dependence, no dependence, big house, small house, anywhere in the world, look at all these wonderful places where people are from, that there's some way that you can take the principles of the book and just kind of stretch them until they apply. Some will fit immediately, some will need you to get creative. But in terms of sort of the starting small, I think that probably the best thing we can do is to spend some time thinking about what are our first choices. And this sounds like such a simple question, yet I find that in conversation after conversation, and this may be an interesting question, those who are listening, to apply to yourself. Where in your day and your week do you feel that you are dealing with your first choices? Like, how often do you cook your first choice meal? Or how often do you spend time doing work that feels your first choice work, or spending time with people that kind of light you all up? And it's an interesting question, because everyone's answer will be different, and in different phases we'll answer it differently. But the simple act of identifying what are our first choices in the 4 areas of work, love, play, and health. What are we aiming, what feels good for us in those 4 I think of that as part of our moonshot, is figuring out what feels good for us in those arenas. And those feel huge and unattainable and far away in many cases. But one of the tools that the book puts forth about that is a model that I call organizing in orbits. It looks just like a circle inside a circle inside a circle inside a circle. And the idea is that we put our kind of moonshot. So for example, as a writer, one of my goals is to write a book a year. It's a moonshot. It's a hard goal. It stretches me. It can be done. The books will be different. Some will take longer than others, but it's so that's my first choice. Great. Then backing up in each of those concentric circles and sort of thinking through, if that's my goal, to have a book, by next, April 13th, what needs to happen in each of the seasons between now and then? Well, I can fill that in. I can think, well, in writing a book, there's time. I need to draft it. I need to create it. I need to write some messy first drafts and throw spaghetti against the wall. Then what? Then I need to, craft that creation into something readable. Okay. I need to get feedback on it. Great. Okay. I need to publish it. Great. Okay. I need to rest before the next book, so I can see the steps that would need it to happen, or that could be 5 years or whatever it is. And then from there, I would think, okay, this goes into the seasons, what would go into the months, and what would go into the weeks. And the idea in terms of starting small is that with any of these, we go back to the day, the unit of the day, and what needs to be in it, the smallest unit of the sort of daily minimum, in order to move toward that first choice. So one of my favorite kind of small step daily minimums that I mentioned in the book comes from my grandparents, he was a very busy professor. She was a very busy volunteer. They had 4 children, and one of their priorities was to spend time with each other, meaningful time together, and have fun together. And so they decided that they would play every day when they were together, and they traveled, half the year he traveled. They would play a game of cribbage, this like complicated card game that they've tried to teach me many times. It's never caught on, but they had this ongoing game of cribbage that carried on in the hospital when their first son was born. And their last game was I think the day before she died. And that was just their sort of daily, it was just a card game. It was not anything. It was just a game, but it was just 20 minutes of fun that was a small thing that would connect them for 74 years. So coming back to today, that's what I would say is, in terms of starting small, is in examining our lives, think big, think far away, and then back up to the smallest unit. If I want to write a book, maybe today I just need to write, if I can sit in the chair for 20 minutes a day, we're going to have to call that good enough. Some days it will be an hour, some days it will be 3 hours, but my unit will be this. Or if we want to get in shape, maybe it's just walk a mile. I don't know, whatever it is. So just sort of thinking of the smallest achievable thing that moves us toward those first choices. And then you have the days that it doesn't work. Yeah.
I love how you just talked about your grandparents and how playing this game of cribbage, right? It fostered connection between them. So, which is going to bring me to my next question. So, in what ways does editing, right, spring cleaning your life or life editing, how does it help making, real human connections and then forming better relationships? I mean, we can just ask them, but can you
I love that.
Besides playing cribbage, what else?
Besides playing cribbage,
how does it help it?
Besides being really, really good at cribbage. I think any form of living intentionally, in short, is a lens for putting what matters first. And I think that when we live a life that feels meaningful, and where we feel that, that our choices are significant and our relationships are significant, and that we're putting energy in the things that we wish to grow. That simple thing, when we feel we're putting energy in the things we wish to grow, I think we feel really grounded. And I think we gain a sense of self-trust. And so I guess if I would have an answer, I would say the answer is, I think, that by editing our lives, we are left with self-trust. And so what does that give us? I think that gives us everything. I think that when we feel good about ourselves, we wish to, share that with others. We trust others more. We wish to, we're not afraid of others seeing us as we are. We have nothing to defend. We're safe. We feel we have much to give without strings attached, without needing recognition. So I think that really, by life editing, we sort of gain a greater comfort and groundedness in our own lives, which, going back to our conversation about social media, means we're not going to look for escapes from it, because we're content. It's the right life.
So since you're talking about that, can you also share then, how does that impact our mental health, right? And our happiness?
Right. I think that's all the same. I think that, certainly in my own life, I feel the times when my relationships flourish are the times when I've taken care of my needs, when I've exercised and written and, done the other things that are sort of, Elisabeth necessary. I feel I have so much energy for the people around me. And I imagine that probably most people in the room feel the same way, that there are a couple of things that just kind of light you all up. And they're probably not huge. Sometimes it's like drink water and, have 20 minutes to read, or, have whatever it is, it's very small things. But I think I just think that's one of the sort of founding relationship rules, is that we should, we all, if we survey the people around us and just sort of, respect their needs, and obviously if they're not causing trouble for people in the universe, but that's certainly something that I think in every relationship I have, I hope I ask, what do you need, what can I do, here's what I need, and from there I think there's an honesty that connects people more through, again, self-trust, mutual trust, knowing that boundaries will be respected and that people will ultimately take care of themselves and be able to be kind and honest with others. I don't know, how does that correlate with what you've seen of sort of relationships on a grand scale through Meetup?
I have to say, so personally, I do agree with what you're saying, in the sense that when you show up a certain way, right, that energy that you put out, others will feel it, and it will be kind of contagious in a way. And it's something that we see a lot of times also, we hear these stories out, people, when they, a lot of organizers, they become organizers and start hosting events because they want to make friends, and they go in there with that intentionality of making friends and, building those connections. And what happens is they make friends, but there are also a lot of friendships as well that are formed throughout those groups, right? And it's because of their intentionality that's what they wanted, but they were able to create that environment and foster that for others.
Yes, I love that. I would call that an edit for generosity.
Oh, right? There you go. Okay. So I have to, we talked about, this sounds a lot like me, like, this is what I have to do. It's what I have to do. Now you're married and have 2 kids and a furry baby. So how do you get the people in your life, to join you? How do you convince them to join you? How do you have those conversations where you do set those boundaries, or, you build that trust where it's okay, I'm doing my edit. Why don't you do yours? Or however it is that you do it together, how does that work?
Right. I love this question. I love this question so much. And I think that this is a question, this is one of the questions I've struggled with and continue to struggle with. And I believe my wisest self knows at the end of the day, we can only edit our lives. That's the one thing we can do, is we can choose how we take care of ourselves, how we edit our lives. And that said, I think that often when we are, the good feelings in life, having clarity, being someone who's growth minded, being happy, being generous, are pretty contagious. Don't you think that? I think that when we're sort of, in an environment, in a friendship, in a relationship, in a household with people that are doing things that that sort of feel good to them and give them energy, that we are kind of inclined to do the same for our own needs. So definitely in my family of, for people, very different how we all spend, for example, on a rainy day, our activities look very different. Mine will probably be, reading a novel, and my husband's will probably be doing some, I don't know, who knows, reading the news, maybe figuring out, where he can go for his next swim. And my children's right now will be making board games out of cardboard boxes, or making stuffed animal hotels out of cardboard boxes. But all of those translate to sort of interesting work that we do, inside when the rain is out. That it's sort of, I think that by sort of doing anything in a way that is fruitful, productive, kind, I think it just kind of sets, part of the culture for this is how we do it. I think by the act of asking for something kindly, more, with children, certainly, they're more likely to respond kindly. And I, again, learned this lesson again and again, but I think it's just to lead, our own lives, conduct them with the principles that feel good and true and right for us. And when people, don't respond in that same way, change our tactic a little bit, maybe say, we can talk about this once you're in a better mood, or once you've had a meal, or maybe this is not a conversation that maybe I should have handled that differently, whatever it happens. But I think it's only something that we can do to ourselves, and respect other people on their own timeline as they do to their own selves. But I think at the end of the day, if we, if we have a, sorry, this is a long-winded answer, that if we have the belief that a culture of any home, whoever we live with, whoever we spend time with, should be one where everybody flourishes, I think we're a lot less likely to take things at other people's expense, and do things that aren't sort of carrying on a bigger level. I think it has a lot to do with just the individual creating culture that then sort of spreads around, I think. It's a wonderful question. That's a wonderful question.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so those are all of my questions. I'm going to go into some of the questions from the audience, and I think I have to sneeze before we do that. I'm so sorry. Excuse me.
Salud.
I did. Oh my God. Okay, so there's a question. The first question that we have is about dating, and I'm actually going to reword the question a little bit. And it's from Pearl. She asks, do you have any advice on editing your dating life? And I guess the question I would ask is like, can we apply the same principles, right, to our dating lives?
Yes, I love this. In fact, I love, I was having a conversation with a friend recently who's recently divorced, who's dating right now, and has one of
pick me.
She has one of the most beautifully edited ways. She's very organized, much more organized than I am. And she has the most beautiful way of going into online dating, which, can do a number. It can do a number. I definitely think that a lot of, we can feel kind of shell-shocked from dates going wrong, being deceptive.
It's overwhelming.
It's a lot of choices. And so what she has done that I think is so interesting and smart is she first of all, she never drinks on a first date because she wants to have, and she does drink. Her way of drinking is to drink, in her own words, like a pregnant woman, which is to say, like, for very special occasions, but like not outside of that. So she doesn't drink on her first dates. And she says that in itself gives her a lot of information about the person she's with. Some of them get really nervous and drink a lot, and then that's her answer. Some of them are, very respectful. Some of them are very curious and want to have a conversation about it, which she takes as a very good sign of like, let me get to know you. So that's one of her things, is to not drink, both to sort of not cloud her judgment, and also to sort of see what happens when, how people treat that in terms of whether it's, how they handle that. And then she also, at the end of the date, makes sure she does not leave a date without letting them know whether or not she wants a second date. So there's no ambiguity of like, oh, that was wretched. Yeah, I'll see you on Tuesday. Oh, the person never calls.
So she lets them know that she wants to see them again.
Yes.
Okay. I like that. Okay.
So she just sort of takes into her, like, it's like a job interview. Like, she just goes in to learn and to be open. So I think of, 50 first dates, I think maybe 3 were second dates, and one ended up being, a relationship that has been a neat one. So very systematic, and also like the first date, sort of, there's a lot of pressure on the first date to be a filter for the rest. That's a really good question. What would you say to that? Can you, and feel free, Pearl, to add any follow-ups to that, because I think that's a fascinating, like, how do we apply that? What other ways are we not thinking of that we could apply?
I am not a dating coach or a life coach. I will say, though, that when you do go into dating, you do have to be very, very clear how each of your dates, of what do you want, what you're trying to get from each of your dates. And you have to be very clear on, what you're looking for and what you're not. Yes. I don't drink, but for a while, I wasn't drinking on the first date. And that was pretty interesting also. But I also have very clear boundaries of like what I would and wouldn't do on the first date, in terms of like, we're not going out to dinner. Like, we're not going to do that. We can meet for a drink. I don't do coffee either, like midday coffee, no. So I would have a mocktail. But it was, something like where they would ask, oh, are you okay with me drinking? You can do whatever you want.
Yes.
This is what I'm doing.
Right. This is what I'm doing. Right. And it's very honest. Like, that would maybe be the other sort of editing hack. And again, none of them are hacks. Like, they're all pretty obvious ways of acting. But I think, like any philosophy, we often have to hear them again in different ways, because we learn them forever. It's a life learning. But one thing that I think is really important that I loved about living in a tiny house is that there's no room for any version of self that's dishonest.
Right.
Like, think of all the ways that can be multiplied. Like, you just kind of have to tell the truth. Like, you can't you have to tell the truth about everything, just because you're sharing so little space. And I think that that however much, we don't want to hurt people's feelings, at the end of the day, I think being honest is always our first choice. And that doesn't mean necessarily, I think a lot of first dates go awry because we feel we need to tell every single thing, and it becomes like a dumping ground. I don't mean honesty in terms of dumping ground. I just mean honesty in terms of like, here's what I'm showing up with. Here's here's who I am, without feeling like scared that they'll find out on the third date. So I think I would say go in honestly and with high standards. And I think that's a good edited way to date. It's a great question.
Thank you. All right, so Greg wants to know, how do we get past the fear of change in our lives?
That's a great question. That is a great question. Thank you for that question, Greg. I think that change is scary because it's, when we're looking ahead at things as they are, however we feel about them, that's the dragon we know. And I think that when we change, that's the dragon we don't know. There's the fear that by changing one thing, for example, like say we have a job that we're really lukewarm about. I've certainly been there and felt like this is the best I can get. And it's scary to change because then I won't have money, then I won't have a leg to the next job, whatever it happens to be. And I think that the main two things that I would say about that, and again, and Jeanine, I'd love for you to pitch into this if you have thoughts on this too, but I would say the main two things that I think are important to keep in mind. One is that pretty much everything is reversible, except for having children. Like if we leave a job that we end up, a month later feeling like bad move, like we can probably figure that out. We can diplomatically try to, if we leave leave gracefully and saying, I'm going to try this. I'm going to try this. It might not work, but I would, I'm going to try this and I'll let you know how it goes. They will probably be on your side. Ditto a relationship. I think that, sometimes we, whatever it is, whatever changes, I think if we leave with an eye for, if we make a change with respect to what we're changing from, and find out it's a disaster 2 months later, we can find a way back to some sort of track. So I guess the first thing is most things are reversible. That's the first truth. And the truth implied in that is, try to act with kindness in any choice we make, just so that we don't, burn bridges behind us. And then,
I would also, sorry, I was going to say, since you mentioned kindness, I would say also be kind to yourself and give yourself grace, because making any decision that is scary, that you're afraid of, you have to be kind to yourself and give yourself grace, regardless of what the outcome is, because you took a step and did something that was uncomfortable. So I thank you for mentioning kindness.
Oh, thank you for turning towards self. Absolutely. Kind to self. And I think, along with that, I think that in making any change, if we have thought about it for a long time, if we've examined our life, if we, really see a track record that this is exactly what it is, and it isn't getting better, we have to trust that. We have to trust that our examination of this pattern is true. And so, into the vacuum left by that change, changing a relationship, changing a job, changing a house, there's a little bit of the fear of falling. But once we, take away something that has, taken up a lot of space in our life, there is a vacuum, and into, that's pure potential energy, which again is scary because, what if bad things happen? What if we're lonely? What if we run out of money? And also into that potential energy, there's room to kind of create and envision what actually does feel right. So I think that I guess I would say sort of one final thing on change is that often I think we crowd our lives with things, pack our day too full, buy too many things. I think that often a response to fear of change is to sort of pack in and cling to things that, I don't know if this applies, I hope I'm not going too far off, Greg, but I think that by letting go and making a change, I think often we are flooded with awareness of, oh, this was what I needed. I didn't need that at all. Oh, so I think even just the clarity of making any sort of change helps us know ourselves a little bit better and know a little bit more about what we need. And once we know what we need, we really can't be controlled. We're not going to make bad choices once we know what we need. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's a wonderful question.
Thank you for that answer. So we have time for 2 more questions. Maria Surechi, I think is how you pronounce the name, and if it's not, I apologize, asked, what is tilting back from the exceptions?
Yes. So tilting back, the tilting back is in in the final, so again, we've got examine your life, edit your life, and enjoy your life. And the final two chapters are enjoy the ordinary days, accept the exceptions. That the exceptions I think of as any day where, both for happy reasons and sad reasons, any era when it's impossible to have an ordinary. So things I might think of would be, on a negative end, when all things that we have trusted go away. I mean, I think that for all of us, the pandemic was quite an exception. That was a crisis. People lost health, lost house, lost all sorts of things. Things that had been sort of a nice, stable floor to our lives suddenly just crashed in. So we tilt, everything sort of tilts out of, everything tilts and we have to find new footing. So that would definitely be a tilt. That was a huge tilt. On the sort of upper end of that, a tilt might be, falling in love, where we sort of disappear from the map from our lives for a little while we're falling into this sort of other place. Having a baby, starting a new job, a season of releasing a book is a tilt. Anything that just sort of all of the energy, if our life is sort of this, if a well-edited life is something that we've sort of distributed the energy where we need it to be, in a tilt, both for better, for happy or for sad, all the energy suddenly goes here. And so that's what a tilt comes with, is incredible clarity of focus. Like, we're not worrying about all this stuff. All of our energy is here. This is where we need to put it. All the blood rushes to our stomach to digest this event, and so then we need to respect that period. We need to trust that, and we need to not fight that, I think. But then we need to find a way to sort of eventually get back. And so that's what I mean by tilt, is to sort of redistribute the energy in a way that does kind of respect the whole life with its first choices in more than one arena. But knowing that, every day we'll have a tilt in some direction, and some of them will be very big, and some we can control, some we can't. But I think we do need to take those into account when thinking about a well-edited life.
All right, Elisabeth, we don't have time for another question, but I do want to share a slide really quickly on your book, and so that you can tell us a little bit about your book and where our audience can find your book.
Thank you so much. So this is Edit Your Life, a handbook for living with intention in a messy world. And it can be found at any bookstore. I would always try your local bookstore first, because they do the most for the communities. So thank you so much, Janine. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. This has been so much fun.
Yeah, thank you for joining us today. I learned a lot. I also want to let our audience know that we are on TikTok. I think it's been a year now. So if you want to catch some really cool content, I think that's what you do on TikTok. You want to watch some really cool content on TikTok, check us out at Meetup, and be sure to follow us. And thank you so much, Elisabeth, for joining us today. And thank you so much to our audience who joined us today. If you want to watch a recording and a recap of this event, you can do so on our blog at meetup.com/blog. Again, thank you so much. And don't forget to pick up a copy of Elisabeth's book, Edit Your Life, at your local bookstore. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you so much. Bye.